Have you ever wondered what happened to your first car? Whereabouts in the world it ended up, who did you sell it on to, or possibly did it end up being scrapped? Well, I've managed to track mine down and I'm here today in York to have the chance to drive my first ever vehicle at the age of 17 once again.
I'm on my way to meet a husband and wife who run a company called Classic Car Hire Yorkshire. They own a number of prestigious vehicles that are surprisingly all up for self-drive hire. To say the least, Chris and Nikki's collection is simply astounding. But what amazes me the most is the trust they put into people driving them wherever they want. Although I admire their trust, it's Chris I applaud, as he's the guy that's built and restored them by hand in his beloved rustic workshop. But with that said and done, it's time to rewind right back to the start of how this story begins. Back in 2012, I made a phone call to a guy selling a Mini on eBay.
Oh hi, is that Ollie? Yeah, I'm calling about the white Mini you've got for sale.
Judging by the photos, it was an absolute minter. Almost too good to be true. But yes, you guessed it.
It's sold. Gutted. Can you let me know if he...
So sadly, it was back to the drawing board. But just before I could hang up, Ollie said a sentence that was music to my ears.
Sorry, what? You can build me one.
And fast forward 6 years, you meet me back in York to tell you the story that I've never told.
The day's finally come just where, like, this car, when I was 17, I don't think anybody understands, like, all my friends were driving around in Volkswagen Polos, Corsas, and I had this dream to have this orange car, and everyone was like, why do you want a Mini? Just look at it. And I'm back with it. So let's take a closer look inside the car. Wait till you see this. This engine is exactly how I actually asked Ollie for everything on this car. Got the blue block. It is very patinaed now. We are nearly 7 years on from when I first owned this car, but just come on. Single SU carb, Thermocoat, Ollie's number, and this is where my 17-year-old inner self was. Orange car, black roof, blue bits, and reluctantly sold this car, and one of the reasons I sold it was just because I wanted to drive so bad, and yet I look back, it's probably a little bit immature, and it's probably a bit like, why did he do all that with that car? But most importantly, this car was a start to my petrol head beliefs and getting into different sorts of cars. So with all this said and done, let's jump in it and go for a quick spin, and I'll take you back from what actually happened when the first day I had this car. When we picked it up from the farm, when we took it for its MOT, and where we took it to actually pay for the tax at the post office. And then I'll explain to you what actually happened and how we ended up selling it. So with all that said, let's jump in the car and go for a drive.
There's something that tells me you will never feel the same about any other car than your first. The eye-watering thing about my first car is she still lives where she was once revived from her sorry state. So to set the scene, I'm spending today visiting all the places that hold the key events to where this story began 6 years ago. However, one thing that won't be happening is the 90-mile drive home with my beloved beauty of a first car. Not this time, anyway. And besides all that, it is pretty awesome that I'm spending all day with the car that got me out of my teens and into my 20s.
You joined me here at this post office 6 years ago. This car came here for its first time to be taxed in however many years it had been off the road, and then went in there, paid £135 tax, I think it was at the time. It has slightly increased on the car now. And then we drove out of here to a place where I'm about to show you is where the MOT was signed off. He pulled it on one thing. He said the back wheels were sticking a little bit with the handbrake. Ollie freed them there and then, done. And this was it. I got to drive home. And then the horror story comes afterwards. But this post office 6 years ago, this car was here. And I'm going to throw a photo up on the screen now that you've already seen of when this was took. And I've just took another one now to make sure that that's what it is. So let's go to the next place and I'll explain the next part of the story. Just listen. Have you heard that? This was my car 6 years ago, and someone else is enjoying it, and you can enjoy it because you can hire this car out. You can come up here and speak to Chris and Nikki and say, look, I want to hire Tom's Mini, and well, not Tom's, their Mini obviously, but this is where the journey of TCR started. Have you heard the synchros? motorway, first time driving my own car, and after going from a modern car to this, feeling how heavy the clutch was, and just thinking, oh God, have I made the right decision here? And then there was one thing I did on that day, and I drove it into the centre of Manchester with my mates in the car, and we pulled up on the centre of the Deansgate, pulled over to the left, and there was a brand spanking new Porsche 911, this is no word of a lie, parked in the bay in front of me. I'm sat in the car with my mates, no stereo because there wasn't one in the car at the time, and everyone's taking pictures of me sat in this car, and I was like, what's going on? And then I realised that people appreciate these little icons more than they do of the brand spanking new cars that are around, and I just think that is why owning a Mini or even owning a classic car is so much better. This is the farm where it was built. Now I don't want to give it away because it's a rural area.
The thing is, I could talk and talk and talk about what I've done with this car, but the matter of fact is, the nostalgia I'm experiencing right now is priceless. I'm reliving the day I relished 6 years ago, and how cool is that? The love I have for cars all stem from this little orange gem, and I certainly owe a thank you to this little tin box.
And this place right here is where I came to have the car MOT'd on the first day. This car was in there on the ramps, and then that's when it went away.
The photos of the underneath speak for themselves. This car left Ollie's workshop with 0 rust. Still to this day, it's rot free, proof that Ollie's work is nothing but perfection. More to the point, look at how young I look in this photo.
When I owned this Mini 6 years ago, there was a few things that were slightly different on it. It didn't have the black stripes on the bonnet. That's an addition, but I think it pulls it off really well. I don't think it had the Mini badge on the front. I think that's new. Certainly has the same plates, same wheels, all the blue bits. The interior is still original, but let's have a closer look and I can show you through the thought process that I went through when telling Ollie what to do when building this car. So let's have a look.
So the original plan was for Lamborghini Orange. Now, very expensive, but the seats are still orange, matching door cards. It's still got the same steering wheel. Those pedals were blue, but obviously they've been worn because it's been used. And then the only other addition is the clocks have been changed to Magnolia. Obviously, sound stereo has been put in and speakers under the rear seats. You remember in my last video, I said this gear knob has to go. That gear knob has to go. Let's look at that. Chrome. Obviously it's had new tyres due to wear and tear. Now these 6x12 rose petals, anthracite grey. One thing that did happen was we had different tyres on it, and they were the Yokohama A08 4Rs, which have now recently, since owning this car, have been changed to competition use only. They never used to have it stamped in them, and now you can't use them for road purposes. As you can see, I've been thrashing it, it is a bit muddy.
When I owned it first time round, you never actually heard the car start up, and that was because it was broken down at that point, which resulted in the sale. So have a listen to this. The exhaust has been changed. It was a twin DTM that was on it, but Chris, the new owner, says it was a little bit loud, and he's changed it for that fact because it was ear bleeding. So let's have a listen to this now. Now you might be thinking, Tom, we've been to all these places, we've seen this car, you've seen where it was built, where it was taxed and where it was MOT'd, and you're probably wondering why it isn't in my possession anymore. And the main reason this car's not in my possession anymore is because we drove it home from York that day, got all the way home, and the car sadly broke down, and there was a few problems with the gearbox. The synchro mesh was crunching every time we changed from third to second, even if I double clutched it. And I was simply so miffed off because I've been waiting so long for this car, and it just wasn't perfect at the time. Now, old cars are never going to be like that. I was probably a little bit naive, thinking I can use this as my first car and use it daily. Sadly, that wasn't the case, and I did sell this car back to Ollie, and then Ollie used it for a bit, put the problems right, and then sold it on to Chris and Nikki, which now rent this car out for daily use, weekly use, whatever people want to rent it for, weddings, photo shoots. Now, I look at this car and I really don't want to leave it. I don't want to take it back and go, there we go, there's my car back, and it is theirs. He is thinking of selling it. Now, I don't have the funds to buy it, so it's out of the question. I've got nowhere to store it, but I've been able to drive my first car again, and the nostalgia that I felt today has been simply amazing. So we're going to take it for one last little spin, and then we'll head back, and then Chris is going to take me out in one of his V8 rat rods and let me experience the rumble of that. So we'll get in this and we'll head back and we'll say bye to this car for the very last time.
As I drove back to return my car to Nikki and Chris, I couldn't help but feel a little bit overwhelmed. I owe a lot to this car, even if I did only own it for a short period of time. It had put me on a path in life, and that path was to create something I'm proud of, to create memories that will never be forgotten, and most importantly, to create a story to tell my future family. You didn't seriously think I was going to skip to the end of this episode without showing you a few of Chris and Nikki's cars, did you? Well, take a sneak peek because you'll be glad to know this isn't the last time I'll be visiting. If there's one thing I've learnt from making this video and this part of my life of selling this car 6 years ago is don't feel regret and don't dwell on things. That car I will always love. It will always have a place in my heart. And yeah, it was very difficult making this episode. Basically, it was hard for me to revisit because this was a story that I never told. And I wanted to put it to an end. And I honestly feel like I've had closure from that. And the most difficult thing is your first car's always your best car. You love it, you cherish it, it gives you the freedom. You don't care if you prang it. That I would have cared if I'd have pranged it. And it's the sense of a new step in your life. Like, wow, I can go anywhere I want now. I've got this, I've moved on, I've done that. And that was the hardest bit for me of getting rid of that car. From the age of 16, I had an apprenticeship. I was working nights. Every single penny I earned went into this car. And the day I got it, I can't describe the feeling. Now, if there's one thing to take from all of this, I don't regret it. I feel like I've had closure from driving my car once again and enjoying it for the day. If I didn't sell that car 6 years ago, none of this would exist. I wouldn't have a YouTube channel. I wouldn't have bought another Mini to do. I wouldn't have a clubman to do the bodywork on. And I wouldn't be in this part in my life where I found a love for film and videography and telling stories through a camera. Although that sale was probably one of the most hardest and most difficult things I've ever had to do in my life, it was probably one of the best things I did in my life. If there's anybody I owe a thank you to, the first person, obviously this video has been based around a guy called Ollie. I tell you what, that guy, he did all the bodywork on the red one, and what a guy he is. And Ollie, if you see this, mate, massive thank you. The other people I owe a thank you to, most certainly, is Chris and Nikki. They didn't have to lend me this car. They didn't even have to return the phone call or the email. And they lent it me for the day at no cost, just to take it out and enjoy it and just let me reminisce from what happened all those years ago and get closure on something that was such a rash decision of just to get rid of it. And honestly, thank you so much for that. But if you want to drive that car, or you want to drive any of those cars you've seen, go and check them out. Honestly, there's not many self-drive companies that will hire cars out to that standard of what Chris has got. And honestly, the trust they're putting in people to hire these cars, it's second to none. There will be plenty more stuff coming with Classic Car Hire Yorkshire. Chris has got a few projects going on and he wants to document them, so they will end up on this channel and his website. To end on a positive, I've definitely got closure. I thank everyone for it, and I had a chance to enjoy my dream again. And you guys understand why there was only ever one video of that car on this channel 6 years ago. So with all that said and done, guys, I wish you all the best, and I'll see you in the next one.